No one ever goes to Evergreen Cemetery after midnight. Not because it's forbidden or fenced off, but because the air just changes. I never believed it until I started working there. My job was simple, night groundskeeper. I trimmed the hedges, checked for any vandalism, and just made sure no one wandered in after hours. Most nights were quiet. A little too quiet. I mean, the dead tend to keep to themselves, right? At least, that's what I kept telling myself. The first strange thing I noticed was the whispering. It wasn't loud or clear. It sounded more like wind slipping through cracked stone, except the nights were always perfectly still. The whispers always started near the oldest section of the cemetery, where the graves were from the late 1800s. The names on the markers were worn smooth by time, and some of them leaned over as if they were tired of standing. I'd stop my car, turn off the engine, and just listen. I couldn't make out any words. Just this feeling that something was being said just out of my hearing range. I blamed it on being tired. That is, until the footprints appeared. They showed up one morning right after my shift, bare footprints, pressed into the dew between the graves. They were too small for an adult's, but way too clear to be from an animal. And they stopped right at my shed. The next night, I brought a flashlight and a radio with me. At exactly 12:17 a.m., the radio crackled to life. It wasn't static, it was breathing. Slow, rhythmic, and patient. I shut it off and laughed nervously. Just old equipment, I told myself. That's when I heard my name. It came from behind a row of headstones. It wasn't shouted or whispered. It was spoken gently, like someone was trying to remind me that I'd dropped something. I swung the flashlight toward the sound. Between two graves stood a woman. She was wearing a dark dress that just seemed to absorb the light. Her face was pale, her expression was calm, and her eyes were fixed on me as if she'd been waiting for me this whole time. "Can you help us?" she asked. Her voice wasn't frightening at all, and that scared me more than a scream ever could. I asked her who us was. She just raised a single finger and pointed behind me. I turned around. The cemetery was full. Figures stood between every grave, men, women, children, all of them silent, unmoving. Their eyes reflected my flashlight like glass, and none of them cast a shadow. I quickly turned back to the woman. "You walk here every night," she said. "You hear us. You feel us. That means you're close enough." "Close enough to what?" I asked. She smiled. "To remember." The ground beneath my feet suddenly felt soft, like freshly turned soil. The woman stepped closer. I noticed her shoes were caked with dirt, but her dress was perfectly clean. "They buried us without names," she said. "Without markers. Without prayers. We wait for someone to notice." I took a step back and the figures all started to whisper. Not all at once, but one by one. Hundreds of overlapping voices murmuring dates, names, unfinished sentences. My head started to throb. I dropped my flashlight. It rolled on the ground and pointed toward a nearby grave. The headstone was completely blank. The woman followed my gaze. "That one is yours," she said softly. I laughed, way too loudly. "I'm alive," I said. "For now," she replied. The whispers grew louder and louder. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached the gate. When I looked back, the cemetery was empty again. Silent. Peaceful. The next day, I turned in my keys. But I still dream about Evergreen. I dream of walking between the graves, hearing my name carried on the wind. I dream of those blank headstones just waiting patiently. Sometimes when I pass the cemetery during the day, I notice something new. A small stone marker, no name, just a date. Tonight's date. If you enjoyed this ghost story and want to hear more tales of haunted places, restless spirits, and forgotten graves, please subscribe to my channel. New stories are posted regularly, and some of them are just waiting to be remembered. Because cemeteries are quiet for a reason, and it's not because no one is speaking. Thanks for listening.